Welcome back, dear students. Now we will move to the second part of our last chapter, chapter 8, Money and Monetary Policy. This part we discussed what is money, and we know that money is anything that is acceptable as a means of payment, and then we talked about what are the different functions of money. We know that money has three functions: as a medium of exchange, unit of account, and store of value. And now we are going to discuss the different measures of money and then end with money and banking system. Money, what are the different measures of money? We are going to differentiate between two measures of money. Money is a stock that includes all items that are generally acceptable as means of payment. Money supply in any economy involves two main measures as represented by this figure. We have M1 and M2. M1 is the narrow definition of money, while M2 is the broad definition of money. So firstly, M1 includes currency or currency in circulation, either paper, money, or coins, plus checkable deposits. We mean by checkable deposits all these deposits that allow the depositor to write checks. Then in M2, we have, in addition to M1, we have also savings deposits and short-term time deposits. And here we mean by these deposits, we mean the deposits in banks for some period of time. In this way, we can define M1 or money in its narrower definition to include currency in circulation by the public in the form of paper, money, and coins, in addition to all checkable deposits. Whereas M2 or money in its broader definition includes all items in M1 plus saving deposits and short-term time deposits. So here we should be able to differentiate between the narrower definition of money or M1, which includes just all different types of currency, either paper or coins plus checkable deposits, and the wider or broader definition of money, which is M2, which includes all items in M1 plus saving deposits and short-term deposits. So we can conclude that M1 is relatively more liquid to M2. But all in all, we can say that money or money supply in any economy equals M1 plus M2. Finally, we are going to turn to one of the important contributions by any banking system, which is the effect of the banking system on money and money supply. So in this point, we are going to study how money is created in any economy. Banks accept deposits from lenders and give loans to borrowers. This is the main function by banks and banking system in any economy. But usually in any banking system, there will be a central bank. What do we mean by the central bank? The central bank is an institution that is responsible for supervising the banking system, that is responsible for controlling the operations of the different banks in the banking system. So actually, banks are not able to loan out or to give loans by all the amount of their deposits. Any bank has a certain limitation set by the central bank on the amount of deposits that can be loaned out. Such a limitation is called the required reserve ratio. So, any bank will not be able to loan out all its deposits. Any bank should set aside some part of its deposits in the form of required reserve. Why? To be able to meet its daily cash requirements. So We cannot imagine that someone is going one day to the bank and asks for his money, and then the bank tells him that we do not have money to give you your deposits. Actually, this is not acceptable in the banking system, and at the same time, this is not possible. Why this is not possible? Because the central bank in any economy sets a limitation on the amount of deposits that can be loaned out. This limitation is called the required reserve ratio. So what do we mean by the required reserve ratio? The required reserve ratio is the minimum amount of deposits that banks are required to hold as reserves to meet daily cash needs. So now, in order to discuss how the banking system is affecting money and money supply, we are going to start by discussing the bank's balance sheet. What do you mean by the balance sheet? We mean by the balance sheet a statement in which the bank records its rights as well as its obligations. We mean by its rights all these amounts of money that the bank has right for it, and we mean by obligations all these amounts of money that the bank is obligated to pay for other parties. So the bank's balance sheet will include loans, reserves, and securities in its asset sides. We mean, of course, by securities the different forms of investment by the bank in stocks and bonds, while the liabilities side will include deposits, debt, and capital. So the bank's balance sheet can be summarized as follows. As you see in this figure, we have in the assets side reserves, loans, and securities, and we have on the liabilities or obligations side debt, deposits, and capital for the bank. Since the bank's ability to loan out of deposits depends on the required reserve ratio set by the central bank, it will affect the money supply or the money creation process. So money supply or money creation process will depend on the required reserve ratio. So for example, if we start with the extreme case with 100% required reserve ratio, this means what? This means that the bank is obligated to set aside all its deposits in the form of required reserve ratio. So in this case, the bank will not be able to loan out any of its deposits. So in the extreme case, with 100% required reserve ratio, all deposits will be held as required reserve, and hence no deposits will be loaned out by the bank. In such a case, the money supply will not be affected at all. But now we can move to a more realistic example regarding the required reserve ratio and its effect on the money supply. Of course, as we noticed, as the required reserve ratio falls, the amount of deposits loaned out by the bank will increase. So, a more realistic example page 121 in our textbook. A lender decided to deposit 1,000 Egyptian pounds in Bank A, given that the required reserve ratio is 10%. So here we mean that out of the 1,000 Egyptian pounds of deposits, the bank will be able to loan out 900 Egyptian pounds. How do we get such an amount? Because actually 10% out of 1,000 Egyptian pounds means 100 Egyptian pounds. So this bank will set aside 100 Egyptian pounds in the form of required reserve and will be able to loan out the remaining 900 Egyptian pounds, as we see in this chart. Here we have Bank A's balance sheet. On the asset side, we have loans of 900 Egyptian pounds, reserves 100 Egyptian pounds, while on the liability side, we have deposit with 1,000 Egyptian pounds. So the left hand side or assets should be equal to the right hand side or liabilities in all cases. So in this, out of the deposits of 1,000 Egyptian pounds, the bank will be able to loan out 90% while keeping aside 100 Egyptian pounds in the form of required reserve. Then, assuming that the borrower who borrowed from Bank A decided to deposit the money in Bank B, so someone will borrow 900 Egyptian pounds from Bank A and then will deposit this amount of money in Bank B. Now Bank B can loan out the amount of deposits available after holding the required reserve. So now we have deposits of 900 Egyptian pounds. 10% out of 900 equals $90. So Bank B can loan out 810 Egyptian pounds as represented by this figure. Here is the Bank B's balance sheet. We have liabilities on the right hand side, deposits 900 Egyptian pounds. 10% out of them equals 90. So Bank B should keep aside 90 Egyptian pounds in the form of reserve, and 810 Egyptian pounds can be loaned out. Noted that the left hand side equals 900 and also the right hand side liabilities equal 900 Egyptian pound. So as we see, there is a continuous process of money creation that is affected by the required reserve ratio. As the required reserve ratio increases, the money supply will be increasing at a lower and lower value. This process will continue and hence the money supply will increase, taking into account the value of the money multiplier, which depends on the required reserve ratio. So the effect of the banking system on the money supply will depend on what? On the money multiplier, which in turn will depend on the value of required reserve ratio. So here we have the formula. Money multiplier equals what? 1 over R small. Here R small denotes required reserve ratio. So in our previous example, money multiplier equals what? 1 over required reserve ratio, 1 over 10%, which equals to 10. So in this case, each Egyptian pound of original deposits will be multiplied by 10, the money supply. So as we said before, each LE of original deposits will be multiplied by 10 and increase the money supply. So the money supply in this case will increase in the following way using this formula. Increase in money supply equals original deposits times money multiplier. Original deposits 1,000 Egyptian pounds times the money multiplier 10. So money supply will increase by 10,000 Egyptian pounds as a result of the money creation process. As we noticed before, the higher is the required reserve ratio, the smaller is the money multiplier, and so the smaller is the effect on money supply. Thanks so much.